Hello, everyone. Let's talk about the correct order in which you should play Soulsborne games in case you haven't played them. I think I won't surprise anyone with this one, but the most noob-friendly game is Elden Ring. Why I think that you should start Souls games with Elden Ring? Well, there are a few important reasons for that. First of all, graphic and visual-wise, this game is very beautiful, and it's more appealing to look at something like that than, for example, to something like that. Secondly, this is open world game, and despite the fact that I think that 95% of all open world games, including Elden Ring, open world wise are pure dog shit, most people are mashing their PP on open world games, so they might like Elden Ring more than, for example, Dark Souls 3, which is more a linear game, or Dark Souls 1, which is a half open world game. In Elden Ring there is a huge variety of everything, starting with weapons, locations, basic mob variety, bosses and other stuff. Yeah, their quality is either debatable or straight up garbage, but new players won't mind fighting the same rated boss for a 10th time in a row. And the most important reason why I think that Elden Ring is the best game for noobs is that Elden Ring is extremely casual friendly. Not only this game is very easy objectively speaking, even if a new player got stuck on, for example, Godric, he can just use summons and easy beat him. Same thing can be said about any boss, well, besides two of them. A new player can just say, I don't give a damn about fairness or fun, I will use every single thing that this game allows me to use, will summon Mimic here, and then he will either just watch how Mimic is solo killing bosses, or he and his Mimic will just run any boss down on their first or second attempt. In Elden Ring there are almost no problems that can make new players suffer, because you can always skip locations on your horse. There are no brutal runbacks, mainly because bonfires are almost always next to bosses, and even if there are bosses that don't have bonfires next to them, the runbacks to them is just skip one very easy basic mob and run for 30 seconds, and that's kinda it. In this game you have zero motivation to fight basic mobs, because you will get more than enough souls by killing basic mobs as bosses in dungeons, and you won't suffer on most bosses, simply because you can always use summons, aka Mimic tier, and just run down bosses. You might say, what about DLC? What about DLC? Look at all casuals who cry in DLC because it's too hard. And no, you morons, it's the opposite of that. Casuals don't cry in DLC. The ones who said DLC was unbalanced and way too hard were Souls players who don't really like to watch how Mimic is killing bosses for them, while casuals use the most giga broken weapons and Mimic, and they easily finish this DLC without the smallest problems. Plus, don't forget that in Elden Ring, because of open world, you can always be a bit over level than boss and kill them in less than a min, and because Elden Ring is just objectively speaking so much easier than other Souls games, I will rank it as the most noob-friendly Souls game. Okay, so I know that many people won't agree with me on this one, but I will put Bloodborne at number 6. There are a few reasons why I think like that. First of all, bosses in this game are just a joke. Well, most of them. Nearly every single boss in this game has a very obvious weak point, and if you keep abusing their weak points, you can easily stagger most bosses to death. And no, I am not joking even for a bit. Bosses like Ludwig, Van Reborn and Parl can't do anything if you keep hitting them in their very obvious G-spot. Unlike other Souls games that are more about medieval fantasy, or in Sekiro case, Sengoku era will fantasy mamba jamba, Bloodborne is a game that uses Victorian era with some Lovecraft mamba jamba bullshit, which can be very interesting to new players, because a game with gothic theme is a very rare thing in gaming community, and honestly I don't even know why it's such easy money, and B, most modern people for some reason are mashing their PP on both Lovecraft Minecraft's Mamba Jamba and on Gothic Lim. Okay, well, let's say how it is on Gothic Gears. Uvu. The Rabax 2 bosses are also very easy because most of the time bonfires are very close to bosses, and also your character is very mobile, which allows you to avoid most encounters with basic mobs. And also among all Souls games, well, maybe besides Sekiro for obvious reason, Bloodborne has the most easy parry mechanic. If in Dark Souls games you have to perfectly press parry button in order to parry humanoid bosses, in Sekiro you can just shoot your gun and sooner or later, by accident or no, you will eventually parry them. And even if you didn't parry them, you can cancel some bosses hits, which makes parry low risk high reward thing. Why I think that Bloodborne is only at number 6? Well, there are a few reasons for that. First of all, most people are still non-stop bitching about 30 FPS. Secondly, this game is very confusing. I am not joking at all. Sometimes finding a right path is harder than most DLC bosses. The best example of this is the Forbidden Woods. Like, how many of you on your own even realized how you should reach this location? Yeah, it's not a Dark Souls 1 level confusion, but it's no better. Also, in Bloodborne, in each location there are so many basic mobs, it's just not even funny. I will say this much, and you can believe it or no. In Yarnam, there are nearly 3x more basic mobs than in Iron Keeping Scholar version. Big fucking whoop. In Bloodborne, especially in early game, you spend way too much souls and time on grinding kills. And many new players, while tryharding for example Falgast Coin or Blood-Starving Beast, might say something like, nah, fuck this garbage, I'm not going to farm kills for 30 min just to spend them all in less than 30 min against boss. And because of that, they might drop this game. Honestly, I don't really know what else to say about Bloodborne. Just know the fact I think that Bloodborne is the second best game to start Souls games. Next one will be Dark Souls 3. In my opinion, Dark Souls 3 is perfect game for new players, but at the same time, Dark Souls 3 will give experienced player a run for their money against a few bosses. Okay, so let's talk about why I think that Dark Souls 3 is perfectly balanced for casuals. As far as I know, most new players, including myself, who play games like that for the first time, have a thought like, don't know who to pick, or you are not sure how hard this game will be, pick a moron with a shield, aka Knight. And Dark Souls 3 has the strongest version of a Knight among all Souls games, because not only has extremely good armor for both early and mid game, not only he has a very good stats for early game, you also start a game with a decent sword and a shield with high percent physical damage reduction, with acceptable stability. Also, this might sound very out of place, but am I the only one who thinks that Ashema is the most durable and the strongest playable character among all Souls games? If, for example, Sekiro and Tarnished are dying from every single homeless fart, Ashema can take multiple hits from bosses, and also unlike Chosen Undead and Slayer of Demon, Ashema is very mobile character, which allows him to roll out from most of the problems. Unlike for example Elden Ring and Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3 is a linear game. And yes, I know that most people for some reason hate it, but I think that it's a very good thing, because a new player won't have a moment like, oh oops, this boss just one farts me while I'm barely doing any damage, and also experienced player won't be able to just brute force his way, simply because it's very hard to go on the other direction, then come back and two-shot bosses. If game devs want you to fight Pontiff before Dancer, you will fight Pontiff before Dancer, which honestly is a very good thing, because game devs by doing that gave you a very balanced and a fair encounters with bosses. Also, because of linear locations, a new player won't be lost 24/7 while trying to realize where he has to go after killing a boss. Ahem Dark Souls 1, ahem Elden Ring. And also, despite the fact that Dark Souls 3 is a linear game, in this game there are a few hidden bosses, and unlike Dark Souls 1, in which it's easier to find a treasure in your own ass than find a hidden boss, and especially finding DLC, in Dark Souls 3 you just have to be a bit vigilant in order to access these bosses. The best example of this are Old Demon King and Nameless King. Why I put Dark Souls 3 above Elden Ring and Bloodborne? Well, simple answer. If you just like me start Souls game with Dark Souls 3, 95% of all other bosses in other Souls games will feel like a joke to you. The very first Souls game that I played was Dark Souls 3, and after bosses like King No Name, Fried, Gael, Demon Prince, and of course Midir, bosses like Orient Smoke, Father Gascoigne, Orphan, Flameworker, and many others felt like a joke. The only bosses that can give you a bit challenge after Dark Souls 3 boss-wise are a few Sekiro bosses and a few Dark Souls 2 bosses. Others will be just a punching bug that you will kill on your first or second attempt. So yeah, because Dark Souls 3 is a very casual friendly, but at the same time it can give experienced player a deep dark fantasy experience, I will put Dark Souls 3 at number 5. At number 4 I will put Dark Souls 1. With Dark Souls 1 there is a weird situation. If you play this game without guides, good fucking luck finding a right path or finding a DLC. Holy shit, I refuse to believe that someone on his own realized how to access this DLC. For a new player, some of these locations will be a pure nightmare. Polite Town, Tomb of the Giants, and Fortress, New London Ruins, Anor London, and a few other locations will be a fucking nightmare if you won't use YouTube tutorials 24/7. Also, good luck on a boss run bugs. Many people are still bitching about Dark Souls 2 run bugs being too long or brutal. And yeah, in this there is a small part of truth, but you think that Dark Souls 1 has less brutal or annoying run bugs? All those people who complain about Smelter Demon run bug either don't know or forgot about run bugs towards Gwyn, Nito, Four Kings, Manus, Calamite, Sealed, Bed of Bullshit, and many more annoying run bugs. Some of these run bugs last nearly 2 min, and I am not joking at all. Why no one talks about Dark Souls 1 run bugs? Well, simple answer. They never got to experience them more than once. Now let me explain. In Dark Souls 1, unlike Dark Souls 2, 99% of all bosses are a pure joke. If you have a bit experience in Souls games, you will devour alive nearly every single boss in this game. Fuck it, even casuals can easily kill nearly all Dark Souls 1 bosses, especially if they play with pure Iunga Yubunga style. Unlike Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 bosses, Dark Souls 1 bosses just can't do shit if you have a big shield and a decent armor. But like I said many times, these games are not just about bosses. The biggest problem a new player will have are locations, which will make you feel lost 24/7. Basic mobs will also be a huge pain in the ass. For example, Black Knights, Skeleton Giants, or these stupid cats on steroids. Why I think that Dark Souls 1 is only at number 4 and not below? Well, simply because most bosses are a joke, heavy armor shield is super duper OP, and also in this game you will always have a 5 to 10 or 15 to 20 S tools, which allows you to just face tank everything in this game. So yeah, because of that I think that Dark Souls 1 is only at number 4. Bronze medal goes to Dark Souls 2. Just like Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2 is a very weird game in terms of if you should start Souls games with it or no, because it is very noob friendly, but at the same time, God have mercy if Dark Souls 2 is your first Souls game. Now let me explain. Dark Souls 2 boss fight wise is surprisingly balanced with bosses difficulty. Yeah, there are many punching bug bosses which you will kill on your first or second attempt, but at the same time Dark Souls 2 has the highest amount of hard bosses after Dark Souls 3. And no, I am not exaggerating at all. I will give you the best example. In Dark Souls 2, the very first boss that you will fight is the last giant, which objectively speaking is giga easy boss even for new players. But after him you will fight Pursuer, and holy shit what he will do to a new players, it's just not even funny. Then after running for a while you will fight Mirtha, which is easier than some basic mobs in this game. And then 10 minutes later Smelter Demon will do snoo to you. And the main reason why I put Dark Souls 2 above other games is very simple. Dark Souls 2 is about you having insane amount of patience. Dark Souls 2 has a feature that I like to call anti-speedrun mechanic. In Dark Souls 2, you just physically can't run forward butt naked and speedrun bosses, simply because unlike other Souls games, basic mobs won't leave you alone. They will chase you as if you personally slept to their mom. I am not joking. Even if you enter a boss arena, and even after killing a boss, most of the time basic mobs will follow you until you reach a specific checkpoint. And not only that, in Dark Souls 2, if you just run forward, you can very easily get jumped by 10 enemies at the same time, and you won't be able to do shit if you got cornered. Also, the runback to some bosses in this game is just nuts. The runback to Smelter Demon, Dark Looker, Sir Alone, Zombie Horde, Wellstad, and many more is just nuts if you just try to rush basic mobs. Also, Dark Souls 2 has insane amount of basic mobs on each location. Yeah, it's not a Bloodborne level bullshit, but it's no better. And of course, ADP. A new player who has no idea what's going on will look at ADP and will have zero clue what this thing even does. Fuck it. Even experienced player will look at ADP and they will ask, wait a second, what agility even means? No, really, who the fuck on his own realized what agility means? You might say that agility is agility, and yeah, but what it means in a context of this game? Is my character more mobile? Is my character running faster? Is he beating his dead meat much faster? What exactly agility means in this game's context? Don't know, figure it out on Reddit. And unlike resistance from Dark Souls 1, which is also a weird and unneeded stat, agility is the most important stat in this game, and game devs didn't even bother to explain it properly. Why I think that despite all of that, Dark Souls 2 is a very noob friendly? Well, there are a few reasons for that. First of all, in Dark Souls 2 you have Estus and life gems, which allow you to face tank absolutely everything in this game, unless you go to one-shot it of course, or jump it by 10 enemies at the same time. In Dark Souls 2 you can very easily be over-leveled bosses and just run them down in less than a minute. Well, most of the time. In Dark Souls 2 you can take absolutely every single weapon type and it will be extremely useful against bosses. In Dark Souls 2 there are a shitload of small mechanics which can make your life much easier, such as kill basic mob 12 times until they no longer spawn, power stance, unreasonably tanky summonable NPC, skeptic spies, bright bug, and many more mechanics or features. But once again, I would not recommend someone to start his journey from Dark Souls 2, simply because Dark Souls 2 is extremely punishing game if you don't play it patiently. Believe it or not, but Dark Souls 2 is much harder game than people intend to admit. Silver medal goes to Sekiro. I would never recommend to anyone who haven't played Souls games to start with Sekiro, and there is a very huge reason for that. And no, I'm not one of these giga smart people who say that Sekiro is not for casuals, because it's super duper hard game for super duper sweaty tryhards. No, the reason of that is very simple. Sekiro just has nothing to offer besides cool looking combat against bosses. No, really, let's talk about it objectively. In Sekiro there is nothing good besides cool looking combat against bosses, like nothing. Locations in this game are dog shit. You have zero motivation to fight basic mobs. Arm tools and combat arts are a joke. Bosses are reused over and over, and even if you count only remembrance bosses as a true bosses for some reason, even then half of them are still reused. Unlike other Souls games, Sekiro has just dead replayability, and my biggest reason is that Sekiro is just a very empty game. In this game there is just nothing besides cool looking and dynamic combat system against bosses. You might say that Sekiro's combat is super duper deep and that Sekiro combat is top tier, and no? First, let's talk about depth combat system. I will say one thing and I want you all to take it seriously. Saying that Sekiro has a deep combat system is equivalent of saying that Mortal Kombat 1 has more variety of combos than Tekken 8. I am replaying Devil May Cry games right now, and without jokes or exaggerating, I can guarantee you that Devil May Cry 3 Dante will just Rebellion and Swordmaster style has more variety of attacks than Sekiro. Not to mention Devil May Cry 5 and especially Devil May Cry 4 Dante, which is just a walking nuclear bomb with so many different wombo combos. Dante has anomaly huge amount of combos. His every single move, his every single hit is a combo inside a combo, which makes him the most broken and diverse playable character among all games. games. Unlike Sekiro, who has only what, 3 different combo at best, not counting Sakura Dance. Now about Sekiro's combat being top tier. I will open a Pandora box to you and say that Sekiro's combat is not below because of its deep combat system, but because it's just a very fast and dynamic combat, anime style combat if you want to call it simply. Sekiro's combat is just very fun, and that's it. I would not recommend anyone to start Souls game from Sekiro, simply because this game just has nothing interesting outside of its anime looking combat against bosses. Yes, bosses have much more complex and faster moveset than bosses from, for example, Dark Souls 1. Yes, I won't deny that, but what exactly that changes? You will always just hit parry bosses with a few exceptions. I would recommend Sekiro only to people who want to fight very dynamic looking bosses with a very fun combat system. Plus, let's just accept the fact that Sekiro is extremely unfair towards new players. Because in Sekiro you play as a character who dies from 2 hits from every single homeless, while you barely do any damage. And because of that many people drop Sekiro, because it's just not fun to fuck up once and then instantly die over and over. And also Sekiro has a feature that I like to call Sekiro's dumb logic. In 2 words, unless you absolutely fantastically perfectly study every single boss fight, you will die over and over. Well, yeah, there are a few easy bosses, but that won't change anything. Because you have low amount of rooms for mistakes, and your character dies from 2 hits from every homeless. Let's accept it. Sekiro is not about skill. Sekiro is about you mashing your head on a wall until you break it. Or about you taking Mortal Draw, Red Candy, Firecrackers, and just two-shotting most bosses. Or cheesing them, okay? But despite all of that, there is one more game which I think that deserves a number 1 spot. And the winner of this video is Demon Souls, which is ironic if you remember that from this game Hidetaka started his games. Why I think that Demon Souls is the last Soulsborne game that you should play? Well, simply because there is just nothing to like in Demon Souls. I made a video named the best feature in each Souls game, and in this video you know what I said was the best feature in Demon Souls? A fucking basic mob placement logic. And as you guessed it properly, this is the most out of us argument. Demon Souls just has nothing that will hook new players. Remaster, I want to say remake of Demon Souls completely killed original game's atmosphere. Bosses in this game are a joke, and if any boss has more than 3 moves, it's a huge miracle. And my biggest problem is that this game has every single bad thing that other Souls games have. A long ass runback from Dark Souls 1, health decrease after death from Dark Souls 2, plus a shitload of heals which allows you to face tank most bosses. Just like in Bloodborne, you spend a shitload of time on grinding heals, a very boring and just unmemorable locations from Dark Souls 3, a garbage weapon variety from Elden Ring, and just like Sekiro, this game just has a lot of bad or just annoying features. But if in Sekiro there were at least cool and dynamic bosses and anime style combat, in Demon Souls there is just nothing that a player will like. I will say one very obvious thing, and I think that most people will agree with it. Demon Souls is only good for the people who played other Souls games, who want to know from what their favorite games started. This game is a museum exhibit for the people who want to see how some bosses, location, NPC, mobs, weapons, rings, and other things looked in their original form. And okay, to be fair, also for the people who want to look at very beautiful and top tier graphic, which killed all atmosphere of original Demon Souls by the way. So yeah, because Demon Souls is objectively very outdated game, I will give it the first spot on my list. Well, that's pretty much it. If you like my video, press something under it. With this, I will say bye bye to you and I will see you next time.